When a few people do something, usually it's not that impactful. When many people do a thing, then it often becomes trendy. But when masses of people do a thing, you've created a fever. And in the early 1900s, Negroes in the South, they caught the fever. Because multiple days per week, they left the South by the train loads, which influenced more and more Negroes to do the same, and without hesitation or without thinking. This is what we're going to become aware of today as we continue our studies from Emmett J. Scott's 1920s book titled Negro Migration During the War. Integrity. Numerous illustrations show the popular state of mind at the beginning when everyone was feverish. The popular state of mind means a collective mental condition that's felt by a lot of people at once. So what will be illustrated is how this shared mindset interacted with the fever that swept through and overtook many Negroes. Men would loudly decry the folly of breaking up their homes, the result of years of unrelenting toil, and venturing into the unknown North, and within less than 24 hours would leave themselves. That's how contagious the fever was. Even the men who ran their mouth about how foolish it was to leave everything behind would get up and go before a whole day even had a chance to pass. Yeah, it's about to get real wild in here early, so pay attention. A good citizen would talk with another about the apparent insanity of those Negroes who had contracted the northern fever. They would condemn their acts with their strongest words. Hardly before another day could pass, one of the two would disappear, having imitated the recklessness of the very people he had so recently condemned. One man, in telling of how they acted, asserts,
"You could see a man today and he would be calling the people who were leaving all kinds of names. He could even beat you when it came to calling them fools for going north. The next day when you met him, he wouldn't talk so loud, and the next day he wouldn't let you see him. That would be the last of them, because unless you went to the depot, you wouldn't see him again. Whenever I saw them shine off from me, I always knew what they had up their sleeves."
That's the mocker turned migrant with the quickness. Now you have to ask yourself, what would make a person with such firm opinions on a subject suddenly make a 180-degree turn within a day? Now I could understand over a period of months or years, but to go from mocking to migrating within 24 hours is incredible stuff, don't you think? This kind of shift typically doesn't happen through logic, but it does certainly happen through the contagious fever. It was just naturally fashionable to leave for the North. A man would make up his mind to go and proceed forthwith to persuade his friends. If they refused, they no longer had any interest in common. It became like one of those sensitive subjects like politics and religion. Two people could have been the best of friends since childhood. But once they disagreed on moving to the North, it was like they had nothing else in common with each other. That was enough to throw the entire friendship down the drain. In talking with a man who had persistently refused to leave, he declared that he had lost practically every friend he had, simply because he did not agree with them on the Northern question. He didn't want to leave, but they obviously did. So what happens in these situations is that people are looking for other people to reinforce their decision. So they're trying to get as many people as possible to agree with their decision, to strengthen their confidence, either to stay firm in what they believe or to take some type of bold action. So when a close friend refuses to support their position, it is often interpreted as a sense of betrayal, because this type of disagreement weakens their momentum and it shakes their sense of doing what they believed was right. For the pastors of churches, it was a most trying ordeal. They must watch their congregations melt away and could say nothing. If they spoke in favor of the movement, they were in danger of a clash with the authorities. They would have to come face to face with the Southern white man, which they really did not want to do. If they discouraged it, they were accused of being bought up to hold Negroes in bondage. They didn't want issues with the Negro congregation either, because that's who paid the bills. If a pastor attempted to persuade Negroes to stay, his congregation and his collection would be cut down, and in some cases his resignation demanded. You see that? His pockets would have been full of lint and cotton balls, and that's it. So he didn't want Negroes to feel that he was the one holding them back. So he was stuck. But he could still wiggle his way out by doing this. In some of the smaller communities, the pastor settled this difficulty by following their flock, as was the case of 3 who left Hattiesburg, Mississippi, following their congregations. Follow their behinds right on over to Chicago and set up shop like nothing ever happened. If the flock's going, I'm going, and I'm never looking back. 2 lumber companies in Mississippi employed a Negro to lecture for the purpose of discouraging the exodus. He was handsomely paid, but he was unheeded. They paid him top dollars for his service, but nobody listened to him. Even now he is held in contempt by his former friends. The devout and religious saw God in the movement. It was inspired, they said, else why could so many thousand Negroes all be obsessed at once with the same impulse? There were set afloat rumors that a great calamity was about to befall the Southland. Here we go. In Georgia and Alabama, hundreds believed that God had cursed the land when he sent droughts and floods and destructive pests to visit them. That meant it was time for them to make their exit. The number of Negroes needed in the North was counted in millions. The wages offered were fabulous, and the letters that came from the vanguard painted pictures of a land of plenty. From some communities, a small group would leave, promising to inform those behind of the actual state of affairs. For a week or more, there would follow a tense period of watchful waiting and never-ending anxiety, when finally there would arrive a card bearing the terse report,
"Everything pretty,"
or
"Home ain't nothing like this."
The state of mind of the community under the influence of the first effects of the fever is illustrated in authenticated accounts of persons who witnessed the exodus from different cities. The most interesting thing is how these people left. They were selling out everything they had, or in a manner giving it away, selling their homes, mules, horses, cows, and everything about them but their trunks. All around in the country, people who were so old they could not very well get about were leaving. Some left with 6 to 8 very small children and babies half-clothed, no shoes on their feet, hungry, not anything to eat, and not even a cent over their train fare. Now, what I will say, although this was wild stuff happening, the people who left had extremely high levels of courage. To just pack up with barely any money and then go to a place that you've never been, this takes a lot of courage to do. I know people who've been living in the same area and doing the same thing since we were teenagers. And a whole lot of things could change for them if they just packed up and moved to another place. But a lot of people are simply afraid to do so because they fear the unknown. And in addition, they have too many attachments that overpower their will, and it keeps them stuck in a certain place and in a certain condition. So the thing that helped so many Negroes overcome this in the South during this time was the mass of energy that was flowing through it. Masses of people were leaving, which created an energy current, and a current that other people could ride on. Right? And they can go with the flow. And the more people that left, the stronger the current became, and the easier it was for other people to catch hold of it and leave, you see? So it's very important to understand the unseen forces of energy, because it's all around us and it's influencing us at all times.
When the laboring man got paid off,
said a Jackson, Mississippi man,
he bought himself a suit of overalls and a paper valise and disappeared.
He was off to the city with fresh overalls and a fresh start on life. Even the young married women refused to wait any longer than the time required to save railroad fare. It's strange that when a Negro got a notion to leave and he could not sell or give away, he simply locked up his house and left the key with his neighbor. Families with $1,000 worth of furniture have been known to sell it for $150. A Negro in Jackson was buying a $1,000 house on which he had paid $700. When the fever struck the town, He sold it for $100 and left. Everything going for the cheap. Sometimes a person may not care how much they paid for it because the price isn't as important as starting the new journey in their life. So if it has to go for the cheap just to get rid of it, then it has to go for the cheap. Comprende? On a plantation in South Georgia where 15 or more families were farming as tenants, there had been a great deal of confusion and suffering among the people because of the lack of sufficient food and clothing. This story is wild, so listen closely. There were the Joneses, a family of 9, the Harrisons, a family of 10, and the Battles, a family of 6. No family on the place had an allowance of more than $25 per month for food and clothing. When this allowance gave out, nothing could be gotten until the next month, and the tenants dared not leave their farms to work elsewhere. The owner of this plantation lived in town 10 miles away and only visited the farm about once a week. Much to his surprise, on one of his weekly visits, he found all the homes and farms deserted except one. On that were 2 old men, Uncle Ben and Uncle Joe, who had been left behind because they were unable to secure passes. Uncle Ben and Uncle Joe sorrowfully told the landlord all that had happened, emphasizing the fact that they were the only ones who had remained loyal to him. Then they told him their needs. The landlord, thinking that the old Negroes were so faithful, rewarded them with a good sum of money and left with the assurance that they would see to the crops being worked. So he saw them as good, faithful Negroes, and he gave them money to take care of all the needs they had. And in return, they assured him that everything was all good. The crops would be worked and everything would be ready for harvest just like the good old days. Now watch what happened. No sooner had the landlord left than these old men with grips packed and with the money they had received boarded the train to join their companions in the north. They took off. When the white man left the plantation, so did they. Straight to the train station on the first thing smoking to the north. Crops left all out in the field and everything, and no Negro hands to harvest them. I know he was hot when he came back. I know he was. In the heat of the excitement, families left carrying members dangerously ill. There is reported one interesting case of a family with one of its members sick with pneumonia. As soon as the woman was able to sit up, she was carried away. This stuff is rugged. At St. Louis, it was found necessary to stop because of her condition. Finding that she could not recover, they proceeded to Chicago, where she died. Several of the migrants have seen fit to make heroes of themselves by declining to return to the South, even on the advice of a physician. Thus, a certain minister is said to have refused to be sent home when his physician had told him there was a possible chance for recovery in his home in the South. He said that he preferred to die and be buried in the North. Caught up in the wave of enthusiasm that swept over the South, these migrants could not resist the impulse to leave. The impulse to leave was the strong urge inside of them, the urge that nudged them to go north. It's the word of the Lord that kept coming to Jonah and instructing him to go to Nineveh. And just like Jonah couldn't resist it, neither could the Negroes. The economic loss resulting from their reckless departure expressed in terms of dollars and cents is another story, and probably can never be even approximately estimated. They don't know how many more stories happened like Uncle Ben and Uncle Joe, and how much money the Southern economy lost from Negroes suddenly taking off. What seems of most interest here is that they were in the frame of mind for leaving. They left as though they were fleeing some curse. They were willing to make almost any sacrifice to obtain a railroad ticket, and they left with the intention of staying. What has been described, of course, cannot be construed to apply to everyone who left. There were those of the business and professional classes who were promoted by other motives than those which impelled the masses of migrants. There were, for example, migrants who in the South had held positions of relatively high standing by virtue of the fact that there do exist 2 institutional standards, the white and the black. Measured by the requirements of the latter, they stood high in the respect of the community, but when removed to the North, they suffered in the rank of their occupation. And here's why. A college president or even a school teacher had little opportunity in their respective fields in the North. The North barred the doors on most Negroes from doing that work. If you were a Negro coming to the North, then most of the jobs available were jobs at the bottom. They had, therefore, migrated because deserted by their neighbors, they were left with the prospect of a diminishing social importance. So they left because the masses of the Negroes in their neighborhoods left. So why stay behind and feel unimportant? They figured that they could go north and still retain some level of respect in the community, which seemed better than remaining behind with none. Possibly the numbers to leave the South would have been considerably smaller had there not been existent so universal a readiness to respond to a call in almost any direction. The causes of this state of mind are stated elsewhere. What is important here is the behavior of the persons leaving, which exerted such a compelling influence on their neighbors. The actions are illustrative not only of the contagion of the movement, but of the fundamental emotions of the Negroes who formed the Exodus. Thus it was, for example, that the movement was called the Exodus from its suggestive resemblance to the flight of the Israelites from Egypt, the Promised Land, crossing over Jordan, the Ohio River, and Beulah Land. So this felt spiritual to Negroes, which added to the influence. Indeed, it is alleged by some Negroes that the myriads of labor agents who were said to be operating in the South were creatures of the imagination of an affrighted Southland, that but few were actually offering positions in the North, but their success was due to the overpowering desire on the part of the Negroes to go. In September of 1916, a Georgia correspondent of the Atlanta Constitution wrote,
"For the past 2 or 3 weeks, I have been receiving 2 or more letters daily from people in all sections of Georgia, asking my advice as to the advisability of the colored people leaving the state in large numbers, as they have been leaving for the past 6 months. I think it is a mistake for our people to sell and practically give their earnings of years just on a hearsay that they will be given larger salaries and great advantages in some other part of the country."
So he saw it as hearsay and was against it. Now, this doesn't mean that he was babooning and trying to go against the best interest of Negroes. He appears to have a genuine belief that this was not the best move, just like many others thought. It will be remembered that the state of South Carolina was not immediately affected. It was not until the discussions bearing on the Negroes' insecurity and economic state, which accompanied the Exodus in justification of it, had begun to be emphasized as the cause of the movement that a great exodus took place in the state. The principal occasion here was the unfortunate lynching of Anthony Crawford. A Negro newspaper with a correspondent in Abbeville said,
Lynching of Anthony Crawford has caused men and women of this state to get up and bodily leave it. The lynching of Mr. Crawford was unwarranted and uncalled for, and his treatment was such a disgrace that respectable people are leaving daily. When they begin to leave in the next few weeks like they have planned, this section will go almost into hysterics, as some sections of Georgia and Alabama are doing, because they are leaving for the North to better their industrial condition. Crawford is said to have been worth $100,000 in property. His wife and 5 sons have been ordered to leave. Word comes that neighbors are beginning to leave, and the number, the first of the week, reached 1,000. The cry now is, go north, where there is some humanity, some justice, and fairness.
So lynchings were a driving force behind many Negroes leaving. And this time, a man of substance was lynched, and for no apparent reason, which caused many respectable Negroes to take off and leave. So the South would have to change some of its ways, or it would be in jeopardy of having a land completely empty of Negroes. And we'll deal with this topic in more detail within the next few commentaries. But on the next commentary, we're going to deal with the economics in the North and the European immigrants who moved there. So stay tuned for that, okay? So right now, I thank you for your time and attention. My name is Brooklyn St. Michael, and I'll see you in the free world.